Hey guys, how's it going? Preparing here. So I know a lot of you guys are kind of thinking about maybe playing Path of Exile. A couple of you guys have played it already, and you guys realize it's a very complicated game. And I want to kind of do my duty. See, I've played pretty much all there is to play on the live closed beta servers, uh, and I have a pretty good idea about what's really powerful, if not overpowered. And I'm sure that's what you guys want to know. You guys don't want us to play the powerful class. You just want us to play the really OP class. Because even if they nerf you, they have to give you some kind of respec or something, right? Well, probably. Well, in any case, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you guys a list of the most powerful abilities in the game and why you should build a character while trying to use at least some of them. If you're making a character and you have none of these abilities on your character, think about it. So let's get started here. So the first thing I really do on all my characters, I set up the auras. And there's two auras that really stand out above all others in my opinion. You have Clarity and you have Discipline. What Clarity does, it adds mana regeneration per second. So if you look at your character panel here, see mana regeneration per second, 27.6. That's with 700 mana, which is quite a lot of mana for not having Eldritch Battery. And if I put Clarity on, which says that will give me 18.5, it put me at 68. So it more than doubled my mana regeneration. Why is this? Well, this is because when you get passives like mana regeneration, 40% increased mana regeneration rate, this will apply to the bonus given by Clarity. So if Clarity, let's say, gave me 10 and I had this talent, Clarity will instead give me 14 mana regeneration per second. Now, this ability is not overpowered enough for it to be removed from the game or be nerfed too much, in my opinion. But if you are making a mana-based build, you are crazy to not use Clarity. Clarity reserves a lot of your mana, but what some people do is they use a blood magic gem and they reserve part of their life instead if they have a lot of that and not so much mana. The other one that I use is Discipline. Discipline gives you a steady amount of energy shield for a steady amount of mana. And the reason this is really overpowered is because energy shield is kind of like life. See, when you take damage, it goes from your energy shield first, unless it's chaos damage, and then goes from your life. Cast my energy shield, I just gained 800 energy shield. So I just gained another 800 damage buffer before my life can be damaged on this character. And at the cost of 100 mana, that's crazy. If you have enough stacking modifiers on your energy shield, some of my characters gain almost 2,000 energy shield from Discipline alone. For it reserving 100 mana, that's an insane amount of survivability. If you play an HP-based character and you don't really understand why this is overpowered, think about it. Think if you had to reserve 100 of your mana or life with blood magic, and you gained 2,000 life. How dumb would that be? Of course you'd use it. So, the other benefit is that when you do a map that has no regeneration, typically these maps say you cannot regenerate life or mana, but it doesn't say energy shield. So if you have high energy shield, if you have some energy shield for those maps, if you're normally all HP, you can turn on Discipline for that map, because the energy shield for a no regen map does actually regenerate. So you can take it slow and have your buffer do the regeneration instead of your life, because in that case it won't work. Excuse me. The other thing is, when it comes to energy shield, you have the Chaos Inoculation. This thing is, in my opinion, one of the most overpowered things in the game. Not because of the ability itself, but because of what it does. It allows you to stack exclusively energy shield. You can disregard all of the life, and you can use energy shield as your entire survivability pool. The reason you can't do this without this talent is because chaos damage goes through energy shield. And in some later stages of maps, I've been hit by a chaos damage hit of over 2,000. And to have over 2,000 life and have a lot of energy shield is not an easy thing to do, because most of it, in both cases, comes from gear. And if you get it from gear, the prefix doesn't really match up very well. To get a lot of energy shield from an item, you need 3 prefixes. You need energy shield static bonus, energy shield percent bonus, and the hybrid energy shield percent bonus. If you have all those 3, you can get pieces of energy shield over 1,000. And that will make you really overpowered. But life is also a prefix. So if you have life on those items, it'll take away from it. And that's why with Chaos Inoculation, it's so overpowered, because you can disregard the life and focus on the scaling multipliers on gear. And you don't take chaos damage, which in some cases is a very significant amount of the damage that would take to kill a character. The reason this is not 100% beneficial is that for calculations that would value your life, for instance, when you get stunned, when you get frozen, when you get shocked, it uses a life you would have had. So what most people do with Chaos Inoculation is they get items that cannot be frozen, and they get very high resist to circumvent this problem. The reason this is one of the most overpowered talents in the game, in my opinion, if not the most overpowered talent in the game, is because of what it takes to build a character around it. Most people need a character that has about 4,000 to 5,000 effective health pool, so life plus energy shield, or in this case just energy shield, or in some cases just life, just to survive the burst in the higher levels in the map areas. So it's all about burst. You can get a lot of life regen with life, so if you want to be a tanky melee and all that, that kind of works out pretty well. But most of the time, if you're playing a ranged character, which you should be playing, burst is all you need to survive through. And some people have been able to achieve 5,000 plus energy shield with 0 energy shield nodes. None. The reason behind that is intellect gives you an energy shield % bonus based on how much you have. And that alone, with Chaos Inoculation, with some really nice items, with discipline, can actually give you an immense amount of energy shield. I've done some calculations, and without too many crazy uniques or anything, just straight energy shield talents, because look at it. You know, when you're an HP based character like mine, you spent most of your tree going towards HP nodes. That's all you do. You know, some of my characters have like 25 HP nodes plus the 8 or so that it takes to get there, as opposed to 0 if you went Chaos Inoculation. So, you know, I prefer life because I can manage it with health pots, but with Chaos Inoculation you can have more of the other kind of pots, so it kind of counterbalances. I kind of stay away from it just because I think it will get really nerfed, but for the time being, we don't know if it's going to get nerfed, and you might as well use it if it's near the area of the skill tree that you plan on being in. So pretty crazy stuff there. Chaos Inoculation, definitely a talent to watch out for if you're looking at building a character that can survive some bursts but not necessarily sustain damage. Now, the other things I want to talk about are spells now, the damage stuff. This is the really interesting stuff. So, as you guys have seen, pretty much the most OP things in this game are totems, in my opinion. I've already shown the decoy totem. Decoy totem is a totem that taunts and shit, and it's fucking insane. But the other totem is a spell totem. So now I'm using a spark. You see it costs 141 mana. It costs a lot of mana because I'm using spell totem, which multiplies the mana cost by a lot. Now, spell totem says totem deals 40% less damage. There's a totem that uses arrow attack. It's called a ranged attack totem, which does this exact same thing for the exact same cost, but also has an attack speed decrease of, I believe, 40%, but basically it's about half. So it's the same totem, but attacks twice as slow, but is still good enough that is being used. So imagine how ridiculous spell totem is. You know, it's kind of like taking an ability that's already good and doubling the attack speed. Okay, so let me show you what I do here. I use spark with the totem, with fork, and with lightning penetration. Let me show you how this works. So if you haven't seen this ability before, it's the one that kind of clutters up the screen. You put a totem, you run away from it, and the totem kills all the mobs. This is merciless. I'm level 67. This character has like pretty okay gear, but you know, not really the best. Look at that, dual totems. When you use totems and you get dual totems, number of totems allowed can sum up to one additional totem, it gets out of control. The reason is, in this game, you spend a lot of the time running around, dodging the mechanics of the mobs you're doing, and picking up loot and regenerating and all that shit. Most of the time, you're doing that. So while if you're casting spark and just standing there, you do pretty well in terms of damage. But you wouldn't do as well, especially when it comes to mobs like that you just saw, reflect mobs. Reflect mobs are the #1 killer of characters, and with spell totem and range attack totem, you take no damage. The totem takes the damage. Oh, the totem dies? You just cast another totem. Using your spells through totems, using your range attacks through totems, is potentially one of the most overpowered things you can do in this game. And they're probably going to nerf it to some end, but I can't imagine they're going to remove it entirely. So keep that in mind when you're having problems, at least with Reflect, or having problems staying alive. Because with totems, you just put that shit down there, run away, and the mob, if it chases you, it dies to the totem. If it attacks the totem, kills the totem, you make a new totem. Most crazy thing in the game. The other thing is, I have this curious spell here, Lightning Penetration. Penetration gems, there's one for each element. There's Fire Penetration, Cold Penetration, Lightning Penetration. What this does is, it caps the maximum number of resistance that the target can have. So minus 39 pretty much takes the 75 resist cap and subtracts 39 from it. The reason this is really overpowered is because when you use something like Elemental Weakness to reduce the resistances, if they have resistances over the cap, it considers that. When it comes to killing mobs, sometimes mobs have resist auras, sometimes they have resist on top of resist auras, on top of resist. Like this one here, immune to curses. See? I couldn't even use Elemental Weakness if I wanted. But the totems, even though it's super lightning resistant, are killing the mob because they're penetrating its resistance. So that's why it's really overpowered. In this game, you kind of want hard counters. You want something that cannot be stopped. If you're basing your build around a curse can be stopped. It can be immune to curse. Or it can have, in this case, resistances over the cap, which even if it's vulnerable to the curse, it won't do anything. But when it comes to penetration, no downside. If the target has like crazy high resist and is immune to curse, you're pretty screwed. But if you use penetration, easiest shit in the world. Here's another one. Look at that. Look how common these mobs are. Super lightning resistant, immune to curses, mob that has shit tons of life. Unmerciless. Easy. No problem. So easy. There's a few other abilities in the game that in my opinion are really overpowered. I can't really show you all of them because I've ungeared a lot of my characters, but I can show you what they are and kind of what they do. So there's a lot of lightning-based attacks in this game that are overpowered because the lightning element, in my opinion, is overpowered because when you crit, or in some cases when you don't crit with a lightning attack, you can apply a shock effect. And what shock effect does is the target takes 40% additional damage from all sources. And one of these abilities that does so is a lightning arrow. So lightning arrow costs a lot of mana right now, and this ability will be nerfed on open beta, but I think it'll still be really powerful. You can see that it applies shock even though it doesn't crit. It's a 13% chance to shock on hit, and you can get some talents here. Shock with lightning damage, shock with lightning damage. So you can shock without critting, which is pretty ridiculous. In my case, I only have lightning arrow weapon elemental, so this is not going to be that overpowered, but it's a pretty cool ability. The reason it's overpowered is because it does full damage effectiveness. So if you had something like, I don't know if I have something here. There we go, 4 to 47 lightning damage. This would add to lightning arrow and wouldn't be scaled in any way. It would just add 4 to 47 lightning damage, then be multiplied by your elemental damage and multiplied again by your weapon elemental damage. So it'll become a crazy high amount. And it'll hit all the targets, do more lightning damage, do more shock, do longer shocks. The reason lightning arrow is really overpowered is because it is a ranged projectile that hits mobs in a group. So you're probably thinking, it doesn't seem that overpowered. But let me show you now what is overpowered. Lightning arrow is overpowered, but specifically with the combo I'm about to show you. The combo that I'm about to show you is the lesser multiple projectiles plus chain combo. So it is mostly chain that is overpowered in this situation. Chain is a green support gem, and what it does is when you hit a target, your projectile then gets recreated 3 times. So if there's 4 targets and you hit one target with chain, the projectile then goes to the other 3. But if you have 3 projectiles, each of the 3 projectiles, when it hits targets, hits the other 3 targets. So you hit the targets crazy amount of times, enabling you to shock stack the targets. But if you use something like lightning arrow, which I previously mentioned, it'll hit all those targets, but also AoE all those targets all at the same time. So if the mobs are grouped tightly enough, not only are they being hit by the first 3 attacks, then being hit by the 3 attacks that hits each of the targets, but every single one of those attacks that hit either the mobs through the original attack or through the chain is also hitting the other 3 targets. So you have an attack where you're hitting the mob like over 20 times with one attack. And with shock stacks, because the hits are independent, they're going to get the shock effect if you crit, or even if you don't crit from what I showed you, and they're going to take additional damage from the hits thereafter. That's why it's mind-blowingly overpowered. And, in my case, I use Power Siphon. Power Siphon is a good ability. I wouldn't consider Power Siphon overpowered, but when combined with lesser multiple projectiles and chain, it wipes up mobs off the screen. I mean, I'm using, oh, that's a nice drop. I'm using an attack which is essentially a single target, and I'm able to convert it into a very effective AoE attack. Let's see. Cast my lower resists. Chain also is really strong because it hits mobs off the screen, so even if you don't see the mob, you can actually kill it. And chain is really overpowered when there's very few mobs. So when there's 2 mobs here, my attack will probably one-shot them very easily, but if it didn't, the attack will swap between the 2 targets like crazy. So if there's 2 targets, they'll get hit by the first 2, then get cross-hit by the projectiles that are coming produced by the chain. Chain costs a lot of mana, but if you plan out your build, it's not really a problem. So there's that to look forward to. There's a few other things that, in my opinion, are also really overpowered, and I'll try to show you those here real quick as well. The latest character I've been making is a witch that highlights these abilities. Let me try to find. I do have too many characters here. Crippa Sucks. Here we go. I'm gonna give you guys a demonstration with Crippa Sucks and how this build works. This build is similar to my Wand Templar build, at least in the auras that it uses and in the kind of gear that it stacks elemental gear. So what I'm about to show you is an attack which is normally pretty shitty, a Rain of Arrows, 80% damage effectiveness. It hits a wide area, but it just does very low damage. It only hits once, you can't stack the shock. It's not a projectile technically, so you can't use chain, you can't hit the multiple hits per attack or whatever. But what I can do is I can use concentrated effect. So it says 65% more area damage. The operative word is more. When you see more damage, that's an additional multiplier that's irrelevant of anything else. So you have more times more times more. So this multiplies all of my damage by 1.65. So even though the damage effectiveness is only 80%, because it's an AoE attack, I can use something like Concentrated Effect to increase its damage by a lot. And this more damage multiplier does affect things on gear, like 8 to 20 cold damage. That'll be reduced 80% of that value, but then multiplied by 1.65, exceeding its original value. And what this Concentrated Effects gem allows you to do is allows you to make pretty mediocre skills very, very strong. So it's the gem that's overpowered, in my opinion, in this case. It allows you to use things like Rain of Arrows, which is that. Hits like the whole screen. Lets you do a lot of damage with it. 2,000 damage for a character using self-found gear that I just made 3 days ago is a pretty sizable amount. And it allows you to do things like use Cleave in ways that are, in my opinion, a little bit abusive. So Cleave is like a melee attack. Although it reduces the radius, Cleave is a melee attack. You're still in melee. You're still going to hit the target, so it doesn't really matter. And you're able to do way more damage with a melee attack that already has very good scaling. I'm not complaining too much about Cleave because melee is pretty underpowered in this game, but in general, the gem allows you to do some crazy things for a very small penalty, in my opinion. The other thing is Elemental Hit. This is the next overpowered ability on my hit list here. Elemental Hit is a green gem. Let me try to find it here. And what Elemental Hit does, it adds elemental damage, but it only adds one of the 3 random types. And it just randomizes, like you attack, it rolls, maybe you get lightning, maybe you get cold, maybe you get fire, and it does that damage listed as a base. The problem is, Elemental Hit can be used by pretty much anything. You can use Elemental Hit with melee attacks, you can use it with bow attacks, you can use it with wand attacks, so it's a very universal attack, which is fine. but it's also extremely powerful. So the reason it's powerful is because the amount of damage that it adds is completely ridiculous. Look at that, 700 lightning damage. I don't even know if you can get that on gear. If you have like the best gear in the game, everything with lightning damage, that's about how much you're going to have. So the amount that it adds is ridiculous. You know, an ability defined by the developers of this game is an ability that is way too strong without gear. And this is exactly that. So use it while it's available. It is a drop-only item, so you know, it might be a little bit rare when the game starts up, but eventually, if you can get your hands on one of these, you'll be sitting pretty in the single target world. So let me just show you here. Elemental hit on the tooltip. It doesn't show the modified damage. It just shows the base. But you can imagine elemental hit with a multiplier of 1.76, with a multiplier of all your elemental damage, which is sizable. You know, there's 50, there's another 30. And you know, another 10, another 25. Don't think I have any on my quiver, but you know, you get the picture. You can multiply that thing like crazy. And while this character is only like 3 days old, and you know, I've only been using gear that I've found on it. You know, oh, immune to curses. All right, let's kill this one. There we go. It's like 4 hits, not too bad. I can show you Rain of Arrows, some pretty cool stuff. And what I use there is a granite flask. The flasks are pretty much the last on my hit list. Obviously, when you play the game, you're going to need your potions, but there are some potions that are a lot better than the others, and I'm going to show you what those are and what you should be looking out for. So number one is the Granite Flask. The Granite Flask will be nerfed in open beta, but I still believe it's going to be one of the most overpowered flasks that you can use on your character. In this game, armor reduces the damage that you take based on the damage. So if you take a lot of damage, armor doesn't reduce very much as a percentage. But if you take a small amount of damage, armor, relative to armor reduces a large percent of that damage. So it's good to have some armor as a base, so the shitty mobs don't hit you that hard. But when you come to a boss, the boss is going to destroy your armor. So for bosses or for mobs that have, you know, affixes or auras that increase their damage significantly, you can use things like Granite Flask to also mitigate that damage as well. It's almost necessary. Not only that, but you can roll your Granite Flask with alterations to try to get the Iron Skin mod, which increases your armor during the effect, but the effect is the armor. So, you know, you can go from, let's see here, my armor is 700, physical damage reduction 10%. Pop a Granite Flask, 32,500, estimated physical damage 83%. Okay, how nuts is that? So make sure you got that thing to pretty much save the life of your character. There's also Diamond Flasks that allow you to crit 100% of the time through the duration. This is really overpowered if you're the kind of character that stacks crit damage, but if you're the kind of character that stacks crit damage, you're probably going to kill yourself on Reflect unless you're a Totem character, so you know, you kind of want to be really careful about that stuff. The other kind of flasks that I think are really overpowered are called Seething. There's a lot of flasks that have instant effect, but Seething is the best one in my opinion. Seething is a prefix on a flask, and it says, you know, reduce the amount recovered by 66%, so it's only 1/3 of the flask that actually heals you, but it's instant recovery. So if you're down some life, if you're at full life, the mob hits you, you're at half life, you know, if you use just a regeneration flask, you're running the risk of the mob critting you the next hit. So if you're at 4k life, hits you for 2k, if you use a regeneration flask, you know, by the time it hits you again, you'll be at maybe 2.3k. But then if it crits, plus 30% more damage, maybe, you're dead. So you can't do it that way. The best way to heal yourself in this game, if you're using an HP-based character, is to use one regeneration flask to kind of, you know, mellow out the damage over time, because, you know, if all these is instant flasks, you're going to have a problem of, you know, if your life is very low, it's going to take a lot of uses of the instant flasks to heal yourself. So what you want is, you want a flask that you can use often. So in my case, I use a perpetual flask, 40% charge recovery. I can use it more times than not. So I get hit, I use this, but then also I use the instant flask to get me in the 80 to 90% HP region. And if I do that, I'm able to survive pretty much the next hit guaranteed. And that's what makes Seething Flask overpowered in my opinion. It allows you to bypass the regeneration part of Flask, which they were originally designed for. Now, this is not something I see nerfed because it's instrumental to a lot of builds, but, you know, get this shit. understand what's powerful, understand what's overpowerful, and you know, make use of it while you can. So hopefully I've given you guys some tips, and you can make your characters a little bit more overpowered than they were originally, and you can kill a bunch more mobs that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to without the crypt tips this day. So have fun, guys. I'm enjoying the Path of Exile, and hope you guys are too, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.